It's been well over a century since the unearthing of Tutankhamun's tomb has fascinated the public on every level because of the historical aspect and, of course, the curse of the location. But when the Mummy came out in the early 1930s, Universal was in the midst, not say a revival, but something that really saved the studio. Their chiller lineup included the Werewolf, Frankenstein, Dracula, and the Mummy. But this pre-code film really stands out. It's probably one of the most underrated films of all time, and has been pretty well the blueprint for the creeping terror we saw in the 30s and 40s and 50s, including a big influence on film noir, and of course the Hammer group of films, which pretty well started in '58. Now this came out in '32 again, a pre-code supernatural horror film directed by Carl Freund. The screenplay was John L. Balderston, adapted by a treatise written by Nina Wilcox Putnam and Richard Schaer. Released by Universal as part of the Universal Classic Monster franchise, the film stars Boris Karloff, Zita Johann, David Manners, Edward Van Sloan, and Arthur Byron. And part of the promotion of this, they didn't use Boris Karloff's first name. He was known by Karloff. And at the time, it was a mention of quality and what he called Europeanness, British stage style. Now, Karloff had done different movies in the past as well, featured everything from crime movies like Scarface to other movies, but this and Frankenstein, but this itself reimagined basically what a British actor could do in this type of film. Now, in the movie, Karloff stars as Imhotep, an ancient Egyptian mummy who was killed for attempting to resurrect his dead lover, Ankh-es-en-Aman. After being discovered and accidentally brought to life by a team of archaeologists, he disguised himself as a modern Egyptian named Ardit Bey and searches for Ankh-es-Aman, who he believes has been reincarnated in the modern world. Now, while being less culturally impactful than his predecessors, Dracula and Frankenstein, The Mummy was still a moderate success, but a great one with critics, spawning several sequels, spin-offs, remakes, and reimaginings. Now, everybody remembers probably the first Mummy movie they watched. I saw this movie in a high-def French dub in the early 1970s, which is kind of mimicked on the recent DVD and Blu-ray releases. Now, this one, in 1921, an archaeological expedition led by Sir Joseph Whemple finds the mummy of an ancient Egyptian high priest named Imhotep. An inscription of the mummy by Whemple's father, Dr. Muller, reveals that the mummy's viscera was not removed, and from the signs of struggling, Muller deduces that although Imhotep had been wrapped into like a traditional mummy, he had been buried alive. Also buried with Imhotep is a casket with a curse on it. Despite Muller's warning, Sir Joseph's assistant, Ralph Norton, opens it and finds an ancient life-giving scroll, the Scroll of Thoth. He translates the symbols and then reads the words aloud, causing Imhotep to rise from the dead in a very, very important scene in movie history. This snaps Norton's mind, and he laughs hysterically as Imhotep shuffles off with the scroll. Norton is said to later die, still laughing, in a straitjacket. Now, 10 years later, Imhotep has assimilated in modern society, taking the identity of an eccentric Egyptian historian named Ardit Bey. He calls upon Sir Joseph's sons Frank and Professor Pearson and shows them where to dig to find the tomb of the princess Ankh-es-Aman. After locating the tomb, the archaeologist presents the treasures to the Cairo Museum, after which Bey disappears. Now, but Bey soon encounters somebody new. So, Helen Grosvenor, a half-Egyptian woman bearing a striking resemblance to the princess, who stays with Muller. Bey falls in love with her, but so does Frank. After discovering that Bey is the mummy Imhotep, Muller urges Joseph to burn the Scroll of Thoth, but when Joseph tries to do so, Bey uses magical powers to kill him, and then hypnotizes a Nubian to be his slave and bring the scroll to him. After a servant does so, he hypnotizes Helen to come to his place and there reveals to her that his horrific death was punishment for sacrilege, as he attempted to resurrect his forbidden lover, Princess Ankh-es-Aman. Now, you wouldn't think that Karloff would be playing this kind of romantic lead because it is a romantic performance. Now, as the movie goes along, believing her to be the princess's reincarnation, he attempts to make her into his immortal bride by killing, mummifying, and resurrecting her. Frank and Muller come to her rescue but are immobilized by Bey's magical powers. However, Helen is saved when she remembers her ancestral past life and prays to the goddess Isis to come to her aid. The statue of Isis raises its arm and emits a flash that sets the scroll of Thoth on fire. This breaks the spell that had been given Imhotep his immortality, causing him to crumble to dust in a very, very effective scene. At the urging of Dr. Muller, Frank calls Helen back to the world of the living while the scroll continues to burn. Now, Karloff's what he call visage that is shown throughout the film, and you can see in the video, is very, very interesting because it's like a living death, but also something. There's danger in those eyes, and there's danger in that look. Now, the movie itself was commissioned by Universal and story editor Richard Shire to find a novel to form a basis for an Egyptian-themed horror film, just as the novels Dracula and Frankenstein inspired their 31 films. Shire found none, although the plot bears a strong resemblance to a short story by Arthur Conan Doyle entitled The Ring of Thoth. Shire and writer Nina Wilcox Putnam learned about Alessandro Cagliostro and wrote a 9-page treatment entitled Cagliostro. The story, San Francisco, was about a 3,000-year-old magician who survives by injecting nitrates. Now, pleased with the concept, Laemmle hired John L. Balderston to write the script. Balderston had contributed Dracula and Frankenstein and had covered the opening of Tutankhamun's tomb for the New York World when he was a journalist, so he was more than familiar with the well-publicized tomb unearthing. Balderston moved the story to Egypt and renamed the film and his title character Imhotep after a historical architect. He also changed the story from one of revenge upon all women who resembled the main character's ex-lover to one where the main character is determined to revive his old love by killing and mummifying her reincarnated self before resurrecting her with the spell of the Scroll of Thoth. Balderston invented the Scroll of Thoth, which gave the aura of authenticity to the story. Thoth was the wisest of the Egyptian gods who, when Osiris died, helped Isis bring her love back from the dead. Thoth is believed to have authored the Book of the Dead, which may have been the inspiration for Balderston's Scroll of Thoth. Another likely source of inspiration is the fictional Book of Thoth that appeared in several ancient Egyptian stories. So here we have a movie based on ancient texts and seems to work on a lot of levels. Now, Carl Fudund, the cinematographer on Dracula, was hired to direct, making this his first film in the States as a director. Fudund had been a cinematographer for Metropolis, and it shows here a lot of mimic scenes. The film was eventually retitled The Mummy, and Fron cast Zita Johann, who believed in reincarnation, and named her character Ankh-Esanaman after the only wife of Pharaoh Tutankhamun. The real Ankh-Esanaman's body had not been discovered in the tomb of King Tut, and her resting place was unknown. Her name, however, would have not been unknown to the general public. Now, filming began in September 1932 and lasted for only 3 weeks. Karloff's first day was spent shooting The Mummy's Awakening for a sarcophagus. Makeup artist Jack Pierce did a beautiful job here, and he had study photos that said he wanted Mummy to design Imhotep. Pierce began transforming Karloff at 11 a.m., applying cotton, collodin, and spirit gum to his face, clay to his hair, and wrapping him in linen bandages treated with acid and burnt in an oven, finishing the job at 7 p.m. Karloff finished his scenes at 2 a.m., and another 2 hours were spent removing the makeup. Karloff found the removal of gum from his face painful, and overall found the day the most trying ordeal I had ever endured. Although the images of Karloff wrapped in bandages are the most iconic take from the film, Karloff appears on screen in his makeup only for the opening vignette. The rest of the film sees him wearing less elaborate makeup because it's not quantity with the mummy's design, but quality. Now, the movie itself continues to inspire in a lot of ways. We can get that in a second. So we see Karloff very dedicated to the character to present it. Now, there was talk about the movie being longer, but I haven't seen the extended scenes, but this is what I heard. A lengthy and detailed flashback sequence was longer than now exists. This sequence showed the various forms Anaxenumon was reincarnated in over the centuries. Henry Victor is credited in the film as Saxon warrior, despite his performance having been deleted. Stills exist of these sequences, but the footage, save for Karloff's appearance and sacrilegious events leading up to his mummification age in Egypt, are lost. Now, the piece of classical music heard during the opening credits, taken from the Tchaikovsky ballet Swan Lake, was previously also used in the same arrangements for the opening credits of Dracula and Rulers of the Murders in a Rue Morgue. It would be reused as the title music of the same studio's Secret of the Blue Room. Now, again, the Scroll of Thoth is a fictional artifact, though likely based on the Book of the Dead. Thoth, the Egyptian god of knowledge, is said to be inventor of hieroglyphics and the author of the Book of the Dead. The film also makes reference to the Egyptian myth of the goddess Isis resurrecting Osiris after his murder by his brother Set. Now, conspirators were caught in a plot to assassinate Pharaoh Ramses III around 1151 BC. Papyrus trial transcripts reveal that the co-conspirators were prescribed great punishments of death, and archaeological evidence led to the suggestion that at least one of them may have been buried alive. Although such punishment was not common practice, this discovery probably influences the film screenplay. Now, there is no evidence to suggest that the ancient Egyptians believed in or considered a possibility of reanimating mummies. Mummification was a sacred process meant to prepare a dead body to carry the soul throughout the afterlife, not for being reincarnated and living again on earth. While it's possible that some individuals were mummified by being buried alive, it is unlikely that ancient Egyptians would think resurrection was possible because they were very aware of the fact that all the necessary organs had been removed and the body would be of little use on earth anymore. Now, mummification, I've studied in the past, the organs are very vital to take them out of the body because that would be the quickest to turn. Now, Egyptologist Stuart Tyson Smith notes the idea of mobile mummies was not entirely alien to ancient Egypt, citing one of the Hellenistic era stories of Seta Kadawas, which features both the animated mummy of Nefer-Kapatath and the fictional Book of Thoth that may have inspired the screenwriter. Now, the LA Times was extremely positive of the movie, although the film otherwise gained mixed critical views, despite the modest box office success. When the film opened at the Mayfair Theater in New York, a reviewer for the New York Times was unimpressed. For purposes of terror, there are two scenes in The Mummy that are weird enough in all conscience, but he said for the rest of the movie, it failed. Now, it was a great hit in the UK for obvious reasons, because Karloff was sort of the king of British media at the time. Now, Rotten Tomatoes is very high in this movie, 89% score based on 45 reviews. According to the site, relying more on mood and atmosphere than the thrills typical of modern horror fare, Universal's The Mummy sets a masterful template for mummy-themed films to follow, and I tend to agree. There is only one, it's The Mummy. Now, The Mummy has been decried for, again, othering Eastern culture, especially portraying it as being more primitive and superstition than Western culture. In one scene, Helen Grosvenor longs for the real classical Egypt, disparaging that she is in contemporary Islamic Egypt. This is viewed by critic Caroline T. Schroeder as a slight against Islamic culture at the time. However, it is clear that Helen longs to be in ancient Egypt, but does not know why, because she has been reincarnated, living in present day, and had originally lived in ancient Egypt, like the feel of the past. Now, there's been numerous sequels to the Mummy. Unofficial and official. The reimagined The Mummy's Hand, and the sequels The Mummy's Tomb, The Mummy's Ghost, The Mummy's Curse, and the studio's comedy horror crossover film Abbott and Costello Meet the Mummy in 1955. These films focus on the titular character named Clarice in the Abbott and Costello film. The Mummy's Hand recycled footage from the original film for use in the telling of Clarice's origins, where Karloff is clearly visible in several of these recycled scenes, but was not credited. Lon Chaney Jr. played the Mummy in The Mummy's Tomb, The Mummy's Ghost, and The Mummy's Curse. So not exactly a sequel, but not exactly not a sequel. Now, the Hammer series we talked about before. There's been several movies over the years. Now, the Hammer movies were effective in certain ways, but the idea is the 1959 version again is based not again on the Karloff film, but on Universal's The Mummy's Hand, The Mummy's Tomb, and the eventual Hammer follow-ups are unrelated to the first film or even to each other, apart from the appearance of the Scroll of Life in Curse of the Mummy's Tomb and Blood for the Mummy's Tomb. Now, there's been modern remakes of The Mummy, of course, the 1999 version, again, way different, more action-orientated than, creeping terror. Now, in 2012, Universal announced a reboot of the film, more in line with the horror films from the Universal Monsters film franchise. The reboot was directed by Alex Kurtzman. The Mummy was planned as the first series of interconnected monster films, as Universal has planned to build a shared universe film series out of the raw vault of classic monster movies. Now, Tom Cruise does star in the film. Sofia Boutella portrays Princess Amnet, the Mummy, for the film, while Russell Crowe appears as Dr. Henry Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, two roles which had previously been portrayed by Karloff in the studio's previous film franchise. The movie really didn't do well, received negative reviews, and is considered a box office bomb, scrapping the plans for the upcoming films of the Dark Universe. Now, again, on the AFI list is 100 Thrills nominated, and 100 Years, and Villains. Now, first came out in the 1990s on VHS as part of Universal Monsters Classic Collection, a series of releases of Universal Classic Monster films, and the film was also released in a very crisp DVD. Now, the 99, Universal released The Mummy on VHS on DVD, and there was a special release as part of Legacy Collecting with part of documents. Now, the Universal Legacy Collection had a 2-disc set and also included the Mummy's Hand, the Mummy's Tomb, the Mummy's Ghost, and the Mummy's Curse. The 75th anniversary edition, which I picked up, is quite good if you have a chance. It's a lower resolution, but still strong. Now, when it was released on Blu-ray in 2012, as part of Universal Classic Monsters, the Essential Collection box set, it includes a total of 9 films from the Universal Classic Monster series. The following year, The Mummy was included as part of a 6-film Blu-ray set, Universal Classic Monster Collections, which also includes Dracula, Frankenstein, The Invisible Man, Bride of Frankenstein, and The Wolfman. In 2015, the 6-film set was issued on DVD. In 2014, Universal released The Mummy Complete Legacy Collection on DVD and 6 films, of course, The Mummy, The Mummy's Hand, The Mummy's Tomb, The Mummy's Ghost, The Mummy's Curse, and the Abbott and Costello Mummy movie. In 2016, The Mummy received a Walmart exclusive Blu-ray release featuring a very prominent glow-in-the-dark cover. In September 2017, the film received a Best Buy exclusive Steelbox Blu-ray release with cover artwork by the great Alex Ross. The same year, the 6-film Complete Legacy Collection was released on Blu-ray. Now, in August 2018, The Mummy, The Mummy's Hand, The Mummy's Tomb, The Mummy's Ghost, The Mummy's Curse, and Abbott and Costello Meet the Mummy were included in the Universal Classic Monsters Complete 30-film collection Blu-ray box set. If you can pick this up, it's a big watch and it's well worth it. The box set also receives a DVD release later in October. The Mummy was included as part of a limited edition Best Buy exclusive Blu-ray set titled Universal Classic Monsters, the Essential Collection, again with artwork by Alex Ross, similar to what he did for Flash Gordon. Now, on a personal level, I have to give The Mummy a 5 out of 5, and I'll tell you why. It's not just Karloff, it's not just the creeping terror, it's just that it's an iconic piece of film. Because during the midst of the Depression in the late 20s, early 30s, and the monsters in Universal not only redesigned the studio, it got people interested in movies at a level that they had not seen in a few years. And all the big blockbusters we see in the modern era, starting with Jaws all the way up, owe a lot to the Universal monsters. Because you can't think of Universal without thinking of Dracula, Frankenstein, the Wolfman, the Invisible Man, all the great characters. Now, The Mummy means a lot to film watchers because when you were a child in the 1950s, 60s, 70s growing up, one of the first movies you saw was The Mummy. He was like Santa Claus, but in movie form. It was such a great story and it's such a great tale. And late at night when it's dark, in the fall when the lights are going down, put on The Mummy and you'll see it's worth it. So ladies and gentlemen, thanks for listening. Give us a like, comment, subscribe, or share. And don't forget, if you're wrapped up in bed sheets, it could be dangerous.